If you're a wargaming enthusiast, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've got your army, your armada, whatever that miniature collection is, your battle force, your lance, the perfect configuration. You're dominating the tabletop. But then you see some new miniatures. A friend brings a new unit that looks pretty cool, or the game cycle of the system that you're playing releases a new update. Always an excuse, always a chance to purchase more miniatures. And no matter how much you collect and build and paint, there's always going to be something on your hobby shelf. And this is a great aspect of wargaming in that as your army grows, the size of the game, it allows you to bring in more tactics. It allows you to experience things and change things. So as you develop a player personality, which reflects the type of army, armada, lance, battle force that you want to build and you want to play, you still want to continue building that army out. This way you can incorporate different things. As a general rule, based on my play style, with the points, the battle value, whatever currency, support points that's going to be to build my army, I usually run about 80% the same thing every time. I know what I like to play. I know what I enjoy with that experience. But I say 80%, just to framework this before we jump into the analysis. I say 80% because that gives me some extra points, currency, whatever that is going to be, to bring in some new units, to bring in some experimental stuff, to bring in some stuff that looks kind of neat. Let's try it out. And I can have fun with it on the tabletop, but I'm not putting my build out of balance, or I'm not going in a lot of different directions that I'm destroying my synergy. So there's this idea, set a little bit aside to experiment and to play things out. So this leads to the question of, well, what makes a unit worth it or not? What makes a unit effective or not? Naturally, in wargaming systems, there's some that are incredibly balanced and some where there is no balance. But regardless of that, when you take a unit onto the table, you want it to perform as best as it can. You want it to be out there earning. To bring some units to the table and just get it blasted off the table, that can be very disheartening. And yes, absolutely, there's a little bit of a learning curve. But when you bring these units to the table, new units, and they get blasted off the table, this is an honest question. We're not going to blame it on the dice, although sometimes that does happen. But is it a question of, and I can't answer this, depends on the system, is it a question of this unit, you made some mistakes with this unit, and that's okay, we just need a little bit more practice, or inherently, in the narrative and the rules and the stats, it's trying to do something in the game. It's trying to do something in the game. But the game mechanics itself don't favor it. It doesn't really work from that perspective. That's where we've got this duality. Sometimes things just don't work or there's not enough synergy. In that case, you don't play it as much or it needs some modifications. All right, we've got that framework. So now, what's kind of that quick checklist that I like to look at if we're buying a new unit? The first is, and again, this is going to come with some sort of cost. Power points, squadron points, battle value, support points, whatever that's going to be. Based on the value, what it costs for that unit, is it able to work or does it need what I call upgrades or a unit tax? What I mean by that is, and we're talking very generalized, you're going to push this into your own wargaming system. I might have a unit that is the ultimate close combat unit. This unit is jacked up. It is just going to destroy whatever it hits. But it's 200 power points. It's a lot of currency, okay? That's a lot of currency. But it needs to get into battle. It can't walk across the table or hover across the table or fly across the table because it's just going to get blasted, right? You've got this really powerful Death Star close combat unit. I can't be sad-faced to my opponent when they try and blast it off the table. Likewise, there's a number of earnings, meaning if it takes 2 or 3 turns to get that unit across the table and then engage the opponent, and let's say it's totally Drago, right? Whatever it hits, it's going to destroy. From that perspective, I attack, close combat, assault phase, I destroy you. Well, those were 3 turns getting up there that it didn't quite work. It needs something else. This is the hidden tax. So I have to buy some sort of transport to transport it, or a movement system, or attach it to another unit so it can teleport. So it's really not 200 points. There's a tax. So that's the first thing. Is it capable to make this unit as it is, or does it need something else? Sidebar for a moment. We're not talking about making a killy unit even more killy. That's not a tax. That's an optional add-on. Meaning if I have this unit that's super killy, assault, but it can get up there, it's quick moving, I don't need a tax, I don't need a transport. But if I add a command unit to it, or if I add another type of attachment to it that works incredibly, well, that's a bonus on top of it. So I'm looking for that hidden tax. Quantity has its own quality in most wargaming systems. And most wargaming systems, there's this idea, and I'm just going to sidebar for a moment. I've certainly pushed this up to the Wargaming Tactics playlist if you want to pursue it further, if you're new to wargaming. But you need to understand volume of dice. Stuff happens, right? I move, I shoot, I attack, I charge, I roll to hit, I roll for damage, I roll this, I roll that, and then you make some rolls, and at the end of that, I'm simplifying it, you remove miniature models. And obviously, I want my dice rolls to be successful, but the idea is in each phase of the game that we get towards you removing your models when I attack in whatever form that is, right? Shooting, close combat, magic power. The dice are going to become less and less and less. First, I got to hit, then see if there's wounds, then you get some saves, then we got some cover going on, then we've got some armor, then we've got some negation, and finally we arrive at it. If we look at a game such as Chain of Command. Chain of Command is a historical World War II game. Fantastic, amazing rule set. Pushed up to the channel here, Chain of Command. The rule set is so good. I have used other miniatures. I've used my Warhammer 40K miniatures and armies with Chain of Command. It's that good. But with Chain of Command, when I shoot, first, it's a D6 based system. So I calculate the unit that I'm shooting, the number of dice. So if I've got 4 riflemen and 2 machine gun teams, each rifleman will put out 1d6, right? Familiar territory. Machine gun teams will put out 8 dice each. I mean, you realize just how much firepower an MG42 can put out. So I've got 8, 8, and 4. That's the dice pool. I roll to hit. Now, I'm going to need 4s or higher. If this was a veteran unit, I might need 3s or higher. If it was a fresh recruit or replacements, I might need 5s or higher, right? That's familiar territory. So I take those dice, I need 4s and higher. I roll them out, and now I take off the misses. So the dice pool is shrinking. It went from my maximum capacity now to a little bit less. Now we got to see what happens to the unit that I'm shooting. 4 or 5 on that D6 is what's called shock. I didn't score a kill, but bullets flying all around, stuff blowing up, it causes shock to the unit. It makes it less efficient for that unit when it's your turn. They're keeping their heads down. And a 6 is a kill. Now, before I roll that, there's some modifiers. Are you behind cover? Are you behind a wall? If you're behind cover, that means a 5 would be shock and a 6 would be a kill. So I roll those dice, and now we see 5s and 6s. And I'll get a combination of 5s and 6s. This idea of a dice pool going less and less and less. So what I mean by that is sometimes a unit that puts out more dice, right? Because the dice gods, am I going to be lucky? Am I not going to be lucky? You're running the matrix where it's like, okay, on a D6, I need 4s. I'll get a number of 4s and 5s. Some will be 2s. You can crunch all those numbers. But the dice pool is the dice pool. So you see some units where I look and say, how much dice does this thing put out? X-Wing miniatures. Even after all these years, TIE Fighter spam was so effective and still is so effective because you're literally taking TIE Fighters, which are some of the cheapest ships in the game, and just putting out, here's 2 attack dice, here's 2 attack dice, here's 2 attack dice, here's 2 attack dice. It's just a massive volume of dice. So sometimes that massive volume of dice is so powerful. If I'm taking a unit that can put out a good amount of dice, doesn't cost a lot, and there's no additional tax, that's a powerful unit. Now, if I have a unit that, okay, it doesn't put out a great amount of dice, but you know what? It's got good armor. It's got good magic resistance. I can take some damage in return. That's a little bit faulty thinking because not that I don't want high armor value units, but that's already saving me, right? That's like armor in a game, whether that's a cover save, an armor save, a ward save, a magic save, whatever that's going to be. That means I've allowed my opponent to shoot at me. Think of it as a way to save yourself from a mistake. You made some tactical mistakes. Something is shooting at you, and hopefully you roll well for your armor so you're around next turn. I'd rather take the investment and not put it in armor. I mean, if I can get it, great. I'm not going to turn it down. I want volume of dice. I want to first strike you. I want to alpha strike you. I want to be in position, bam, light you up, knock you out. So that return fire from you is going to be non-existent. So I'm always looking, what is the volume of dice? Now, this is a sliding scale up and down checklist because, look, I want maximum volume of dice. I want to put out 30 dice a turn. I want the unit to naturally be fast so I don't have to pay any tax or upgrade. I want good armor, and I want it to cost nothing, right? There's no can't have it all with that. Now, in terms of the rule set, this is where we also have to look for hidden opportunities. And we tend to play the same armies, but you get locked into a list every update, every 6 months, every time a new unit is introduced. You need to tear your list apart and relook at it because some games, I'm just going to pull two examples of big games. Games like BattleTech, the rules are pretty much solid. I mean, you can create some new units. You can explore different aspects of the game, but the game is very, very well balanced. Can you pull off the tactics on the tabletop? That's a story for a different time. You lock your lance in. For BattleTech, that lance is locked. Lance is 4 mechs, kind of standard battle group. Warhammer 40,000, they're updating the armies, they're updating the rules, they're adding new stuff all the time. This idea that I have an army locked in, with some updates, units might have changed. Things might have changed. I might be missing out on something because this matrix is constantly changing in a game that does a lot of updates and is constantly introducing stuff. It's like, massive amounts of DLC that just completely force you to retool your character. It's kind of like the analog equivalent of that digital thing that we're all used to. So this idea of where if I'm a rule set that changes drastically, there might be some tweaks to units that are now much more effective. So this idea, circling back around to the first framework, right? Our player personality, you know what you like to play, but I always like setting a little bit aside for some other units, for some experimental tech to add new miniatures. But when you're thinking about what do I want to add next in my collection, looking at this checklist, coming up with some sort of tactica dialogue, so you get a unit, you have some fun. It's not something that you just get and there were deficiencies that you were aware of, and it gets blasted off the table, and you lose the motivation to fix up those other aspects. It's sitting on your hobby shelf waiting to paint, and every time you see it, you're looking at it. We've all been there, done that. Building your collection out organically, but having that checklist of which units to select.